Has the Bitcoin bubble finally burst? While the digital coin's value soared to an all-time high of nearly $65,000 per Bitcoin a month ago, last week saw a dramatic one-day 30% drop to $30,000. The past 24 hours have been kinder for Bitcoin holders, with the cryptocurrency gaining thousands in value, but concerns over the volatility of this relatively new form of currency remain. And joining us to provide his analysis on the situation is Jimmy Odom, co-founding partner of Bit Capital Group, one of the first blockchain security mining and management companies. Jimmy Odom, welcome to Chicago tonight. And every time we talk about this, we do have to do the quick primer. Just remind our viewers, what is Bitcoin? I mean, it's the most famous cryptocurrency. And then what is blockchain?
Blockchain. Great question.
Blockchain.
So what is blockchain? What is blockchain? The simplest way to think about it is the blockchain is a grouping of receipts of transactions. So think just going to Walmart. You've got a receipt of transactions that you bought something in exchange for something, a dollar or some money. And then you tied everyone in the world's receipt from Walmart together. That is a chain of receipts, right? Blockchain is just doing that digitally. That's the simplest way to think about it. There's a grouping of receipts that have been tied together. And so what Bitcoin is, what is Bitcoin? For me, it's so philosophical. So I know that it's not going to be helpful for the audience to really go into that esoteric.
Blockchain is helpful, and we'll just leave it at it's the most famous cryptocurrency. All right, so we saw that.
Yeah, that's fine.
We saw that it's
so much more than that.
Obviously,
it's so much more than that.
It recovered today. It dropped from its high of 65,000. It's now hovering around 38,000. What would you say caused that precipitous drop?
Yeah, I mean, what you have in Bitcoin are a few factors that really impact the way in which external systems view it. And what I mean is the value of Bitcoin is not derived from external individuals or entity placing assignment of value there. That's first thing. But I would say that a few news cycle events cause there to be external pressure against what people saw as the value of the future of Bitcoin. There were a lot of FUD, what we call FUD in the crypto industry. It means fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There was a lot of FUD tossed around China cracking down on Bitcoin miners. 60% of the world's hash rate is in China. And so if China was going to then take effort to lock down a bunch of miners, that could have a disastrous impact on the way in which...
And just to be clear, China is basically heavily restricting the use of Bitcoin in blockchain mining, correct?
I'm sensitive to answer that in the affirmative or the denial. And reason being is there's a lot more nuance than that. What I would say is probably happening is China is beginning to take the stage to deploy their digital yuan. So the digital yuan is going to be national. What Bitcoin is, I would think that from China's viewpoint, was a testing ground to see what could be done with a digital currency. And now that they've got a ton of market data or beta data, now they're saying, okay, the digital yuan is ready. Now we want to start to reduce the competition, and that's
so they might have their own cryptocurrency that they want to control.
Hold on. There's no might. They do. It's already being piloted in many provinces in China. So there's no question that this is a real thing.
Something definitely to watch. And what about the environmental footprint? I mean, that was the case Elon Musk made for sort of pulling back on Bitcoin, that mining Bitcoin is going to have a humongous environmental footprint. Remind us why.
Well, I think that it's really disingenuous of someone like Elon to speak out in that manner against this industry in this way, particularly and predominantly because he and his business are surrounding themselves around government subsidies, right? And so the levy against the carbon footprint or carbon tax against anyone that is Tesla, I think is clear. That's for anyone that's understanding the value of what he's saying. But if we're going to assess the energy consumption of a network, then it's important and probably fair to analyze the footprint of every industry, whether it be Visa, MasterCard. What about refrigerators that are consuming more dormant energy than any other industry sector that Bitcoin could create? And so you've got to be conscientious on what they are saying and what their incentives are. And that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. All incentives are laid bare before the network. And for those that are speaking, oh, Bitcoin's consuming X amount of energy, well, like, is that the most egregious consumptor? No, it's so many other industries that we could tap first to have that conversation. That's why I think it's very disingenuous for anyone that starts to talk about the ecological impact of that is Bitcoin. It's just not a fair statement. And it's clearly they have incentive to do so.
But still, a lot of folks do raise concerns about that aspect of Bitcoin. So, all right, let me ask you then, this dip, are you not concerned about this for the long run? Are you still pretty bullish on investing in Bitcoin?
Not at all. Everything that I own is in this industry. My assets, my businesses. I don't own a home, but I own mining farms, right? I own my facilities outright. And that's just giving you context. The way that I and many in my industry see this is we are not measuring the success of Bitcoin against the dollar or the yuan, right? We don't measure that. It's the internal network usage. You can only use Bitcoin to facilitate transactions within Bitcoin. And that is where the strength lies. If I were to tell you that Bitcoin is the largest supercomputer on the planet, you would probably have no clue what I'm coming from and what I would be discussing. But that is a truth. It is a fundamental fact. And so if I wanted to use the global computer, the largest supercomputer on Earth, I would have to use the language in which that computer operates, and that would be Bitcoin. So what is that worth? What is that value? It's not translative to US dollars. It has a complete, segmentary value outside of what most are looking at it as.
All right, Jimmy Odom, we'll have to have you on again to further demystify this for our viewers. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.